Hello all, welcome back to Consciousness Rising. Bit of a different video today. Well, I say different, it's actually got a lot of themes that I've covered already in my Consciousness Rising episodes, but this is actually a presentation I made way before I started my channel on BitChute and YouTube and wherever else I've posted to over the years. But I thought I'd just present it because I've never recorded it, so it just seemed a bit silly that it was sitting there. Yes, some ideas and themes will be repeated, but I think there is some new information in here as well, so, see what you think. It's called Subconscious Trauma and Emotional Freedom Techniques, and anyone that's watched my channel will know that I've covered these things before. However, there might be a little bit more on trauma in this than there has been previously, so I'll crack on. As I've said before in a video, there are two minds. They're in operation all the time. We have the conscious mind, and indeed we have the subconscious mind. And this image beautifully encapsulates the fact that the subconscious is way, way, way more powerful and deep. And that's why I use that image. I think that's a very, very powerful image to explain what's going on with us. Because our consciousness is conscious and subconscious, So that's a good image for that. So let's break them down. The conscious mind is what holds our present moment awareness, what's going on for us right now. That is also why mindfulness practice is very good, because when you default to the subconscious a lot, you're programming, because your subconscious is your programming. If you can use mindfulness, you're becoming much more conscious. So that's why mindfulness is very important. And can be very powerful. It's also the creative mind, so it can visualize anything, it can come up with our wishes, desires and aspirations, as I've said, and the key point there is that it is only 5% of our sort of activity is actually stemming from the conscious mind, which is tiny in comparison to the subconscious. The subconscious mind, it has our acquired programs. Now that's very important, because actually we're all programmed from a certain point, and indeed it is habitual. It learns in a very habitual way, and it's full of our instincts and experiences, our fears and all the things like that are programs that we've acquired, and it's in operation 95% of the time. Now when you think about that, you realise just how powerful this thing is and why we need to understand it and work with it. A little bit on brainwaves. You cycle through these all the time. I've mentioned this before, but the one I want to draw your attention to the most here, and in fact I'll get the mouse. There we go. I don't often do that, but there we go. Is the theta state. Reduced consciousness, deep meditation, dreams, light sleep, and REM sleep. And that is important, and I'll show you why that's important as we move through. So, the theta state. It is the brain activity of a child between the 3rd trimester and 7 years of age. Okay, that's very, very important to understand, because we know now that consciousness starts very, very early. Indeed, while you are in utero, you are learning, you are absorbing. So that goes to makes me think about things that maybe trauma that happens to the mother. Indeed, it does get passed on to the child. If it's within that 3rd trimester, it's likely that might be a trauma, and that's a deep, interesting thought, isn't it? Like, how many of us have trauma from when we were actually inside our mothers? Like, that opens up a whole can of worms. It is the state of imagination. When you look at a small child between that age group, everything they do is play in imagination, and for them, whether it's riding an imaginary horse, to them it's very real, because they're in a different state of consciousness. They haven't got those other states available like we have as adults. But the beautiful thing about that is it's nature's way of getting us to super learn. A child between those ages can learn. That's why you hear of children becoming like geniuses, because if they are nurtured enough in that stage, they can learn at a very much quicker rate than when you're out of that state. It directly programs the subconscious mind. That's very important as we go ahead. Child development and the subconscious. The subconscious mind develops between the last trimester and 7 years of age, as I've said. Children are in a constant learning state and are learning from their relationships and environmental experiences. Now, when you go back in time, when people didn't understand this, they would think it was something wrong with the child often when they had a certain problem or difficulty in life, maybe their behaviour or whatever was going on for them. But knowing this really is empowering and important, because we can now look at the environment. And in fact, I was watching Michael Tsarian the other day, and he was saying how doctors get this wrong all the time, because when you first go to a doctor, I mean, don't get me started on all that anyway, but the one thing that they'll never ask you is, what are your relationships like? What are the people you're interacting with? What's your work like? What are these external things that are around you that are having an effect on you? And that can be energetic, you know. So they are in a constant state of learning from their environment and their experiences. Okay, this is a slide on how it manifests within adult life. So 95% of our thoughts are actually subconscious programs and beliefs we received from others as children. And that's why I'll often say the greatest form of education is the actual unlearning of these programs and working with them and thinking about, where do these come from. The greatest education is actually unlearning in some ways. Psychologists estimate that up to 70%, now that's a huge amount, of these programs that we think on a day-to-day are self-limiting and disempowering. So I've said before, haven't I, in videos, that the human race a lot is a race that, you know, hates itself on many levels. There are so many people dwelling in, you know, self-loathing, and you understand why when you look at something like this. And I've put that at the bottom there. How many of you have that friend who often acts just like their parents but can't see it? You know, you might get, I don't know, Bill, who every time something goes wrong, he reacts in a very way that sounds exactly when his father does the same thing. And the joke about it is Bill can't see it because it's subconscious. It's not in his conscious awareness field. The other thing that I might touch on in the future is actual ancestral trauma, because that's really important as well, but it's very deep and it's not for a video like this. It's actually key to a lot of Michael Tsarian's work, and I completely agree with him. I think it's very, very important to address. But we'll move on. Okay, so I've labelled this the problem with positive thinking and self-help books. Not that those things are terrible, but this is the problem why they often don't work, okay? So, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, they learn in different ways. Often, people can read self-help and get benefit, but it is only temporary and doesn't stick. You know, they read a book and they go, well, you know, I've got all these great ideas, and they'll be buzzing, but it doesn't actually stick. And then a year later, they're still the same person and they haven't moved at all. And that is because the knowledge hasn't transferred to the subconscious, which is much more powerful. If you want to change your thoughts, beliefs, perceptions and habits, you have to tap into the subconscious, which many people don't understand, which is why I do a video like this. The subconscious mind, as I've said, is habitual. It's like a tape player playing programs over and over again. The same things happen to me. Why do I have the same experience all the time? Why do I keep finding myself in these same predicaments? You know, I can't break this cycle because it's a subconscious program and you're not aware of it. That's why. A quote by Dr. Bruce Lipton: our thoughts are mainly controlled by our subconscious, which is largely formed by the age of 7, and you cannot change the subconscious just by thinking about it. That's why the power of positive thinking will not work for most people. The subconscious is like a tape player. Until you change the tape, it will not change. Powerful, powerful statement, that. And actually, what he's saying is, you can rewrite it, but you have to change the program. So you have to delete your old programs, work with them, and then change them. And I'm going to show you how to do this. Little bit on PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is defined on the NHS website, as useful as they are, as an anxiety disorder caused by very stressful, frightening or distressing events. Now I've put that in red there because that's very, very key, and so many people don't understand this. I mean, I go into schools and teachers don't even understand this. Any situation a person finds traumatic can cause PTSD, which means that trauma is very individual sometimes. It's not just, as I've put at the bottom there, it's not just caused by big events such as car crashes, war or violent assaults. It can be something as simple as, and I'm sure I've used this example before, a child of the age of 5 gets left round the corner and he suddenly becomes frightened because he thinks he's lost his mum. She's moved on down the aisle in a shop. That could cause PTSD. Something which you might perceive as quite small, but actually could have a lasting effect on that child into adulthood. And it could even develop a self-limiting belief such as abandonment from that one incident like that. And the funny thing is, when they become an adult, they might even forget that event. Yeah, it will still be there, scarred in the subconscious, which is why something like tapping is so important, EFT, because you can, whilst tapping, I'm sure I've said this before, not only are you addressing the subconscious programs, you are unraveling them and revealing them so you can work with them. A lot of people, while tapping on something, will go, oh, I've just had this thought, a memory ping up. What's that about? And I always say, well, if it's pinged up, it's significant. So then you would apply EFT to it. So yeah, it's not just big events. We need to understand that. Some symptoms of PTSD, and there is a brain scan there which shows that there is actually something going on with the brain. But it is also an energetic thing, which I'll hopefully cover. So, some of the symptoms: re-experiencing the event through flashbacks and nightmares. That's very, very key. I see a lot of people come to me for help, especially with EFT, who have flashbacks, and usually by the end, once we've addressed the trauma, they disappear. All these symptoms will disappear. Feeling sick, trembling, guilt, shame, avoidance and emotional numbing. Now that could be through alcohol or drugs, because that is actually what's happening when someone is alcoholic or using drugs. They're trying to escape this horrible feeling inside themselves. Feeling isolated, feeling on edge, anger, irritability, insomnia, and concentration problems. Now, I mean, even two of them would be enough to, make you feel like complete crap. But a lot of people get all of them, which is awful. PTSD and trauma is an awful place to be. It really is. Now, a little bit on attachment theory. Now, attachment theory is quite a big theory, and I've literally narrowed it down to one sentence, because it's so simple. Yeah, there's so many books written on it, and I've read quite a few books, but yeah, and I've said there, the quickest and most effective way that we establish healthy connections and attachments with children, or indeed adults, is through comfort and joy. Children need comfort and joy. And also, as I'm reading that, I'm thinking, how many adults actually are in a state of comfort and joy in this mad world that we're living in right now? Can you honestly put your hand up and say that you're in a state of joy? Are you following your bliss? Are you comfortable with your situation? So many of us are deprived of that, yet it's so simple. But yeah, that basically to me nails attachment theory. You don't even need to read any more books on it. But the guy who's often quoted with attachment theory says this. So he's talking about childhood development here. The infant and young child should experience a warm, intimate and continuous relationship with his mother or permanent mother substitute in which both find satisfaction and joy. And that's how it's built. It's built through those early experiences of parental figures, And how many children don't have that? And have abusive parents, or have parents that don't attend to their emotional needs or whatever, don't teach them morals. It's no wonder we've got, a world full of infantile adults, when you think about childhood. And I've covered that in my Alice Miller video, haven't I? But, yeah. Childhood trauma and attachment, so I've linked the two together here. Because of the damage to a traumatized child's brain, they will often see all adults the same. That's very important to remember. So, they will often see, abused children often see the abuser in all adults. So, you can come in with all the goodwill in the world to try and help this child, and they'll see you as the abuser, even though they might not have ever met you before. They see all adults as a threat. They're in a constant state of fear. Okay, this is really important to point out as well. In cases of neglect, a child will not have established connections and healthy attachments. Now, I hear a lot, and through my career, I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, it's just neglect. It's the lowest level of abuse. Neglect causes serious, serious damage. When the child does not have these healthy attachments, it is really bad. So, at the bottom there, and this shows it. Studies have shown that sometimes neglected children So these are children that have just been neglected. They haven't been abused in any other ways. They will not always respond to therapy as successfully as children who have been physically or sexually abused. So we need to really, really think about how important it is that children build healthy attachments and trust in adult figures and the people around them. So sometimes children that have been physically or sexually abused will actually respond to therapy better than that of a neglected child. And as I've put at the bottom, it is because neglected children often don't have safe, healthy attachments, and therefore their brain pathways aren't established. We are social creatures. Yes, I know I talk about individualism a lot because to me it's very, very important, because I'm completely against socialism and I'm completely against communism. However, we do thrive on other people sometimes. We need that sometimes, you know. And on the left there, that's a very old thing, but I thought I'd put it there. These are brains of 2-3-year-old children. The image on the left is from a healthy child, while the image on the right is from a Romanian orphan who suffered severe sensory deprivation. The right brain is smaller and has enlarged ventrices or holes in the centre of the brain. It also shows a shrunken cortex, the brain's outer layer. So actually, neglect is extremely damaging on a physical, emotional, and, well, indeed spiritual, you know, all the levels it's damaging. Traumatized behaviour. We know that comfort and joy build healthy attachments, but for traumatized children, they often don't want comfort and joy. A lot of people don't get that. They're like, oh, I'm trying to help, you know, I'm being calm, I'm being patient. And, you know, the child don't want it because they're traumatized. But so many adults don't understand this. But it needs to be said. It needs to be, this is something that needs to be taught in schools, I think. When we try and build a relationship with a traumatized child, they will often lash out or push us away. This is because they are scared whenever they get close to someone. They are scared of attachment. They are scared of building a relationship with you because they're traumatized. It takes time, especially with children. It's not an overnight cure. Indeed, any therapy, even EFT, as quick as it works, and I've seen it work with people, is not an overnight cure. Alice Miller, I did a whole video on her, didn't I, reading out from one of her books. She's had such a profound effect on me as a human, but also as a therapist. As I've put there, she was a Swiss psychologist and psychoanalyst who wrote a lot about the consequences of child abuse. She argues that children who are subjected to abuse by their parenting figures will suppress these feelings. She says that often these people will go on to take out these feelings onto their own children. Thus, a cycle of abuse ensues. And that's what's been going on for years and years and years and years. We need to break this pattern, this terrible pattern, and we do it by raising consciousness. We do it by raising awareness. We do it by addressing these subconscious programs, these limiting beliefs we have about ourselves. We're such powerful beings that just don't know our own power. I highly recommend her books. If you want to understand child development and you want to understand the impact of child abuse, there is no better, I don't think, psychologist than her. Okay, a little bit on the amygdala and the fight, flight or freeze response. Because often people just say about fight or flight, don't they? But there is actually a freeze response as well. This is an automatic stress response that enables us to survive a dangerous situation. It evolved as a survival mechanism for surviving the wild. So it isn't something to be demonised. I have to make that very clear because people think, oh God, the amygdala is shooting off all these stress chemicals. Yeah, it has a purpose in nature. But, you know, we've gone too far now. We live in stress too much. It has a purpose. If you think back to when you was a caveman or whatever, whatever your beliefs are about the past, I'm not going to go on into that today. But if a saber-toothed tiger is coming to attack you, your amygdala will keep you safe because it will put those stress hormones round your body in order for you to survive. It's a survival mechanism. There we go. The amygdala senses danger and sends a signal to the hypothalamus. This is like a command center, the hypothalamus, and it sends signals to our body to run or face the danger. Okay, so it's important. What then happens is blood rushes away from our vital organs and into our arms and legs, enabling us to literally fight or flight. A lot of people don't even know that. So this is something that's very important. However, people are living in this continuously, and that's where it's wrong. And which is what I've done on this on this slide. The problem today with the stress response. Our stress response was very useful and still is when we are facing a life-endangering situation. The problem is when we do not know how to attend to our well-being. Many people who are overwhelmed are almost always in a constant flight or flight. This evidently heightens our cortisol levels, pulls blood away from our vital organs, pulls nutrients from our gut, which lowers our immune system, leaving us vulnerable to ill health. Stress literally kills. Now think about this. Who in society right now are using this against us constantly? Just turn on the news for 5 minutes and tell me that this response isn't being used against us, because these nut jobs, these powers that should not be, understand very well how to use this against you, which is why I've said for years, you must step out of fear. Understand these things that I'm teaching, and you can raise your consciousness. And then it's like I said about mind control. If you know how mind control works, you're not mind controlled anymore. You can't be. It's literally impossible. But yeah, we are living in a sea of stress caused by nut jobs. Okay, a little bit on how. So I talked a lot at the beginning about the subconscious, how to reprogram it. Okay, this is the solution right here on this slide. There are 3 main ways in which we can transform our subconscious mind. They are hypnosis. That's why people often, go to hypnotherapy, because they'll literally stop smoking overnight with a couple of sessions of hypnotherapy. Repetition, to form a habit. Now, when you're in school and you learn your ABCs, how do you learn it? You learn it through repetition. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, like that. Then that becomes a habit. So if I ask you to recite the alphabet now, you don't even have to think about it because it's subconscious. Same when you learn to drive. I remember my first lesson learning to drive. All your limbs have to do different things, and it's like, oh my god, it's overwhelming. The more you do it through repetition, it's automatic. And now I'm sure many of you have experienced where you drive somewhere, you get there and you go, oh god, didn't even, you almost forget the journey you've just been on. That's because it's subconscious. You're doing it automatically. And the third one, the one that I'm most interested in personally, because I'm trained in it, or one form of it, is energy psychology. Belief change modalities, of which EFT is one. A little bit on energy psychology. Fundamentally, all energy therapies can be traced back to acupressure and shiatsu, so they're very ancient, which therapies developed independently but alongside each other in China and Japan, respectively. However, similar therapeutic concepts can be traced in many parts of the world, which are equally as old or older than the Chinese/Japanese therapies. So this is ancient knowledge. Again, this is one of the things that goes on to be occulted. People don't want you knowing this, because if you learn all this stuff, you can step out of your fear and your programming. It links so perfectly to my other videos, this, when I think about it. Okay. I'm sure I did this before, but I'm going to read it again because this is such a powerful story. The history of EFT. A lady in her 40s was seeing Dr. Callahan, that's him on the left, for a year and a half. So they was in therapy for a long time together. She had a profound phobia of water since childhood and could not even face a full bathtub of water, and was even terrified when it rained. What he did was he asked her one day if she would like to try an experiment. He himself, like me actually, funny enough, had become dissatisfied with conventional methods and had been looking into the human meridian system. Mary often described having a feeling in the pit of her stomach. After asking Mary to tap under her eye, she suddenly exclaimed, "It's gone. That horrible feeling I get in the pit of my stomach. When I think about water, it's completely gone." So she had a connection. Every time she saw water, she would get this pit in her stomach. Now, funny enough, he only used one point. One tapping point, which was under the eye, which is actually the stomach meridian. So just by doing that, it went. She then ran out of her chair and over to his swimming pool, which he would conduct for experiments. After this incident, Mary's phobia had vanished. Dr. Callahan went on to develop TFT. Now, EFT comes from TFT. I'm going to explain that, thought field therapy. So this was a really, really significant moment for him, and indeed energy psychology as a whole. This was a very, very important case. So then we shifted from TFT to EFT. So Gary Craig, who was one of Dr. Callahan's students, became the founder of what's now known as Emotional Freedom Techniques, or EFT. He basically simplified the tapping procedure and reduced the 10 or 15 different algorithms used in TFT and removed the diagnostic element from TFT. So basically what you would do is, if you went to Dr. Callahan for a TFT session, he would diagnose what the issue was and he would come up with a specific tapping routine for that particular problem. So you might only tap on a couple of the points. Basically what Gary Craig did, which was so genius yet so simple, was he goes, why don't we just use all the points for every problem? You know, it's something so simple yet it was so profound, and indeed that's what EFT does. So instead, EFT uses one comprehensive tapping routine and does not require a diagnosis. It is also really simple to learn and apply it to anything. That's why it was what Gary Craig did really was perfect the wheel. He took what Callahan had done and just was like, yeah, we can make this even simpler. We'll just basically tap on every single point for every single problem. And thus EFT was born, and it's been life-changing for so many people. You don't have to look far for the evidence of that now, which I'll talk about at the end. Emotional freedom techniques, then. So a very simple slide of what they are. Often called simply EFT or tapping, EFT is a non-invasive meridian energy healing modality. EFT is a mixture of physical stimulation of acupressure points and targeted wording. This is why it's such good shadow work, guys, because you're actually using exposure therapy. You're bringing out the darkness and then using the meridians to cleanse it. This is why it's so powerful. Okay, it works on the principle that, and I completely stand by this, the cause of all negative emotions is a disruption in the body's energy system. This is deep, deep occulted knowledge right here. Well, it's not occulted anymore because EFT is becoming more and more popular by the day. Dr. Peter Stapleton, look into her work. She's a psychiatrist from Australia who's doing some amazing work. She's really backing it up with science now. She's pushing it out there. She's going into school. She's really, this is becoming more mainstream, and it's beautiful to see. This is one of the things. This is an awakening. We're going into ancient systems and using them again, and that's what I believe is part of the Great Awakening. It's that rediscovering what was once lost or occulted from us. So, in essence, when doing EFT, we remove the quote-unquote wrong energy from our body by using the meridian lines as a kind of waste disposal system. We access the wrong energy by calling it up, and then we use tapping to delete it or reduce it over time. A little bit on science and research. There's so much out there now. In fact, since I wrote this, I wrote this a couple of years ago, there's much more out there now. This guy, very interesting figure on the left, his name is Dawson Church. He also is a psychiatrist that uses EFT. He's one of the leading figures. He carried out a controlled study on cortisol reduction. So cortisol is the stress response that comes from the amygdala. The study compared EFT to traditional talk therapy, so something like counselling, which I do as well. And I'm not saying, please don't take me wrong, counselling is brilliant and powerful, and I've had many clients that have never touched EFT and have still benefited from counselling and have applied it. So the results of this study showed that cortisol levels dropped by up to 24% in the group receiving EFT, with some people showing a drop of up to 50%. That's half. And interestingly there, the group receiving traditional talk therapy such as counselling showed no drop in cortisol. This is why when someone comes with trauma, I must use EFT with them, unless they really don't want to, because I always restrict the clients, their autonomy. They can make up their mind. If they don't want to do EFT, I don't push it on them. However, I will strongly suggest them to them, because trauma is an energetic thing and a body-based problem as much as it is a mind problem. More research and studies can be found on EFTuniverse.com. That's that guy's website, and there's so much there. And a lot of these figures, like the people in the EFT world, I have to say, their integrity is amazing, because yes, obviously they earn money off it or whatever, but they also do a lot for free. And when there's a tragedy or crisis, they'll go into a town and they'll help for no prize, no money. They'll just do it because they, the love of helping people. So there's a lot of really nice people in this in the EFT community that are doing it for the right reason. Okay, sources of further information. I've put some books there that to me are they're all life changing. Really, really powerful stuff in there that kind of incorporate everything that I've said about in this. However, I would add one book to this list. So I'll read the book. So you've got The Biology of Belief there on the left. One of the most powerful books I've ever read on spirituality, I have to say, because it blends what Bruce Lipton has done. He's such a genius. He's blended science with spirituality so perfectly. And if you read that book, it's life changing. Alice Miller, The Drama of Being a Child. That's the first book she wrote. It's very, very good. And her other work is also extremely valuable, especially when it's to do with children and childhood trauma. Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. I didn't have any slides on Joe Dispenza, but I'm sure you've heard me talk about him before. That book is amazing, as is all of his books, which I've read all of them. And there is a book by Bowlby, A Secure Base. Very good to understand attachment theory, although I think my sentence just nailed it, I have to say. Not blowing my own horn, but it can be summed up very, very simply. But he does talk about like attachment issues that can come from different. Yeah, it's there if you want it. The EFT manual, that was written by I think that was written by Dawson Church, the guy I just brought up about. That was the first EFT book I bought. Another one to add to that would be The Tapping Solution. That's a very good book. Yeah, I think that's it. There's some other books out there now since then. Peter Stapleton's got one out called... what's it called? That's going to annoy me now. She's done one recently that's been very popular, actually. And let me just look it up, because... The Science Behind Tapping, it's called. Dr. Peter Stapleton. So yeah, obviously I wrote this a long time ago. I would have added them, but I didn't. And there's some websites, and this is the last slide. So the Bruce Lipton's website, Dr. Joe Dispenza's website, EFT Universe, Mind's a good website for understanding a lot to do with mental health, to be honest. And the tappingsolution.com, which wasn't featured, but yeah, there's some more out there. And look these guys up on YouTube. A lot of them have done a lot of stuff on YouTube and other platforms, but yeah, that's just like a sort of semi-review video, I guess, just going over some of my key points that are central to a lot of my work. But yeah, I hope you find it useful. Take care, guys. See you in the next one.